South Florida Regional Planning Council is going to have to put our heads together and figure out what's best for the entirety, not necessarily just what's best for my city. So with that, I will pass the baton to Ms. Henry.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Blattner, what we heard from the Miami experience is that it can be done, and that there are lots of players at the table with a single goal, with a mission. Let me change the discussion just a little bit. One of the things that I heard, and I want you to know that it resonated with me, was that the real impetus for Miami sort of jumping head feet into this really fast was there was an opportunity. The Brightline was coming. They were building their station. They had an opportunity that they couldn't miss, and that is if we were ever going to have this Tri-Rail Coastal Link go through, whether it's without getting into all of the nuances, but there was an opportunity that presented itself, and they took advantage of it. There is a similar opportunity that is taking place in Broward County. And let me start with this discussion that many of you've heard about a rail stop at the airport. I want you to know that the county, my board, the administration, we are all supportive of having a rail stop at our airport. Thank you. There's an opportunity to do it, and we're working towards that aim. But one of the opportunities that presented itself to Broward County that I felt very strongly that we should take advantage of is that in the process of this discussion, we recognize that in order to get into the airport, we are having to have serious conversations about an intermodal system at our airport. And our master plan is underway as we speak. But knowing our airport as well as I do, and the people all around as well, we know that there is a very limited window, very slim piece of real estate that would literally accomplish having an intermodal system that would not only accommodate the car vehicles of all types, Uber, you name it, but rail, buses, rental cars, etc. And that opportunity presented itself to Broward County, and therein lies a discussion that we're currently having with representatives from all over Florida, FECI, and I'm not quite sure who's all in the discussion, but there's discussions. The long and the short of that story is that the county feels very strongly that this is an opportunity for us to reserve an easement over the rail corridor to make sure that if we're going to connect any other mode of transportation, whether it's our ability to go from the airport to the seaport to the convention center, we're going to have to cross those railroad tracks at some point. Whether we're going to connect the wave into the airport, we will have to cross the railroad tracks. And so the last, I guess, 9 months of discussions that we've been having, it's about how do we accomplish that. And I'm of the opinion we're close to resolving any issue, and I'm going to look to you to make sure you're nodding and saying that is in fact true. Again, it's an opportunity. So the reality is you want to take people where they want to go. That's a major hub for a whole host of reasons, and we want to do that, and we want to do that seamlessly, and we want to do that now because, okay, we can all talk openly here. We know that there are discussions down the road about future relationships between FECI and all over Florida, and as a county government, we really don't, that's the private sector's business, don't really want to get into it, but if we have an opportunity now to secure our future without a lot of fanfare, we would want to do that. So that's important from a Broward County's perspective. The second issue has to do for all of us, and this is an impact as it relates to the Tri-Rail Coastal Link, has to do with the bridge. You've heard it, you've talked about it, in different from different perspectives, but a private entity isn't going to build a bridge that I've heard numbers from 80 million, 100 million. I don't know what the cost of that bridge is going to be if you're looking at a bridge. I don't really know in today's dollars what a tunnel would look like. All I know is that the marine industry is very critical to our community. We cannot start having a real conversation about the Tri-Rail Coastal Link until we address that issue. And it's going to require that there be a lot more dialogue with all of the community, the Broward County community. This is part of our discussion, and we really do need to have that in a way that is meaningful to all the parties. When you're a county government, and the Tri-Rail Coastal Link, as many of you've indicated, is a real opportunity for the eastern portion of our county, but there is a central and a western portion of our county with voices as well. We need to bring those voices to the table. They need to understand how it can help. And if specifically that's not something that they see today that can help them, what else are we planning that they can see themselves being part of a spoke in a wheel? And we should all feel somewhat reflective. The sales tax initiative, we should never ever repeat that the way we did that. I mean, it was not our finest hour, and I know we can do better. So I'm really looking forward to a real community dialogue, all of the players at the table with a sincere effort to understand that the entire community has to see a benefit, so that we can unite it in a united fashion, rally around a real transportation network for Broward County.
All right. Thank you. And George?
Thank you, John and Bertha. I'd say amen. And thank you to the SFRTA and to Broward County for hosting this. I think it's long overdue. It really is important. And from the Broward Workshop standpoint, for those of you who don't know, the Broward Workshop is an organization that has the CEOs of approximately 117 members who are the CEOs of the largest employers in Broward County. So we have the superintendent of schools, we have the head of the hospital districts, we have the head of AutoNation, and so on and so forth. And historically, we have taken positions on major issues that relate to transportation, and we've been involved working with the public sector and the other stakeholders in order to advance those projects. The runway, the new runway at FLL is a good example. The turning notch and harbor deepening and dredging projects for Port Everglades and the Word-A-Bill is another example. And of course, we have been involved with Tri-Rail over the years in terms of looking for dedicated funding sources and a number of other issues that arose over the years. Jim Cummings, who is very actively involved, a member of the workshop, has served on the SFRTA board and is sort of our expert. Jim's sitting in Montana right now, and so I'm here to talk to you. But he shared with me a lot of his ideas as well. So the Broward Workshop is committed to helping to make this a reality. As I said, I'll say amen to that surtax. It was poorly done, poorly organized, not well coordinated, lacked leadership, and from our perspective did not have a plan, a real plan with real numbers, real projects, real start dates, and so forth. So we want to get back to planning for the future of transportation, and obviously Coastal Link is one of the critical issues that we need to address. There are many ways to help fund these projects. Tim alluded to a number of them, and so did Chip, including obviously the P3 opportunities. But while I'm disappointed with the surtax, we can't stop. There has not been a real discussion in Broward County or any real leadership in Broward County focused on the Coastal Link, okay? What did we hear today? And you know, remember what your mother used to tell you, okay? Where there's a will, there's a way. Well, you know, Francis Suarez, Commissioner Suarez basically told us that to be clear in your vision, what happened in Miami-Dade County? The MPO prioritized this mass transit and these projects as the #1 transportation priority. That's a big deal, okay? We've never done that in Broward County, okay? I mean, I tell you, you can look at the annual report from the MPO, and mass transit is not the #1 priority in here, okay? There's a lot of other stuff, good stuff, don't get me wrong, but we've got a lot of work to do. And so one of the issues that we can talk about soon, and I would disagree with Bertha on one thing, we don't need to solve the New River to get going here, okay? It'll probably be the last thing we solve, okay? The first thing we have to do is we've got to start planning, and we have to have some leadership, and we got to take, as they said, the low-hanging fruit. And the low-hanging fruit is Aventura to FLL, okay, or maybe to State Road 84. And we do need to think about east-west connectivity, okay? The corridors that kind of got neglected. We did 595, and nobody bothered to put a mass transit corridor into that program when they did that program. They should have, but they didn't. And I'm not blaming DOT, because I think there was discussion, and I don't think Broward County really got on board with it. So that's an example. We have corridors that can make that connectivity. But in terms of the low-hanging fruit, let's get moving. Now, how do we get moving? Okay, that's the great challenge. I think Tim said we need to have that laser-like focus. And so between Suarez and Ryan, okay, we can get that laser-like focus and be able to prioritize it. Who's going to be the leader in Broward County? Who's going to do that? Is it the MPO? They went in the other direction from transportation. Can they get back on board and work with us to make the Coastal Link a reality? I think we can all work together, but somebody, some entity has to be the leader here. In Miami-Dade, it sounded like the MPO took the leadership and helped make that happen and brought it together. The other issues that I see are the linkage to the wave. I think that's of critical importance, because for a period of time, it may be the only way we connect downtown Fort Lauderdale to the Coastal Link, okay? And eventually, we need to study very carefully the impact we're going to have on the marine industry. Is it a bridge? Is it a tunnel? Is it a tunnel maybe just for the commuters, and maybe the bridge is still for freight? Do we move part of the freight out to the CSX under the sublease, which they have an absolute right to do, to move some of that heavy freight and free up the East Coast, the Coastal Link, for more passengers and less freight? That needs to be done. How do we define the access fee? May not seem like an important deal, but it's a big deal. How much is it going to cost us to be able to run the Coastal Link on the FEC tracks? That's very, very important. So these are certainly some of the issues I see, and I would like for us to begin this process sooner rather than later, and so I really look forward to hearing from these folks about how we can do that. I will tell you this, the business community, we employ hundreds of thousands of people. The 127,000 cars a day that go just between Broward and Miami-Dade County. You can add to all of these trips on major arterial roadways, you know, the probably 40 million tourists we have a year between the three counties. It's serious stuff. We're going to continue to grow. You heard that. It's a fact of life with redevelopment, smart growth, everything else. The burden's on us, the leadership in this community, to make it happen. And the question is, how do we do it? When do we do it? And where do we do it? And how do we fund it? Thank you.
All right, thank you. I mean, these have been some fantastic perspectives. We appreciate all those thoughts. We've heard from Secretary O'Reilly and Jack Stevenson and Francois Elis already, but I was going to ask the three of you, from the perspectives of planning the coastal link, or also any coordination with Brightline? Any clarifications or observations, sort of based on sort of the issues we just heard from this group of leaders?
So I agree with practically everything I heard. If Broward wants to run trains, commuter trains on the FEC corridor, it needs a leader in Broward. I think somebody is going to have to pay operations funds. Whoever is going to pay that money needs to be probably the leader, because that's the key thing that needs to be resolved. I think there's an operator out there. Tri-Rail can operate the trains. It seems fairly logical to me. But they don't bring funding to the table. So you have to have somebody who operates. MPO can prioritize, provide funding. I think the MPO and Broward County, the MPO and Miami-Dade County, from the presentation I saw, worked really closely together to advance the project. So I think that leader is essential. I can't stress those operating funds are what's the difference between the project being successful or not. I think capital funds get attracted to projects that are ready to go. And I don't think there are any issues along the corridor that aren't insurmountable. But I don't see advancing a whole bunch of studies on stations, on bridges, et cetera, and getting people all excited when there's no future of anything actually getting built. Study for study's sake is kind of not worth it.
All right, thank you. Jack?
Been there and done that, right?
Yeah.
Let me, in terms of Broward County, I'll throw something forward. Number one, my chairman's great. I just want y'all to know that. he is an incredible advocate for our service and transit in general for the county. But having said that, the one thing that impressed me the most in Miami-Dade County was the coming together of the leadership and the arrival on site of a number, it wasn't just one, but a number of champions who understood the complexity of the transportation issues that were facing Miami-Dade and the ultimate downside for Miami-Dade. And the one thing that they did was they came together as a group in several different areas. I'll be perfectly honest with you. It was the MPO that became deeply and critically involved. It was the county commission that also saw the challenges and the pitfalls that they were getting ready to get involved in. The commission for the city and the CRAs, the Downtown Development Authority was the business community in effect, understood what they were facing in terms of the future, and it wasn't pretty. And what ended up happening with that is they sat down, they set a vision, like Commissioner Suarez said, and they put aside their priority differences, okay? You gotta start somewhere, you gotta get it done. If everybody is fighting over every corridor, do mine first, do mine second, I want this, I want that. Somehow or another, they saw the challenge that they had, and literally the political elites and the business community put aside their priorities and combined and came forward with the one plan and a way to actually execute it. And I was totally shocked, to be perfectly honest with you. But you need the champions that truly believe in what you're doing for the entire community, for the whole, in this case, for the entire Broward County. So at SFRTA, we take the regional perspective. We work with anybody that wants to work with us. I attend meetings at whoever asked me to. Commissioner Blattner even asked me to go to meetings with him, and I meet with Commissioner Blattner. So, and of course, Bertha and my other partners at Broward County and Transit, Chris Walton. But that out of that group and within these political structures, we need to find some real champions for Broward County, in my mind.
Thank you. And Francois?
Look, I totally agree with everything that was set up here as it relates to the coordination that needs to occur. I think I need to go back to Chairman Ryan's perspective, which is a laser-like focus. I go back to my experiences even before FECI and having been in the public sector and seeing what happened in Denver firsthand. From the point of Federico Pena, who everyone remembers as Secretary of Transportation, but when he was mayor of Denver, set that laser-like focus to create what today is what everybody refers to as the Denver system. And went through Mayor Wellington Webb and eventually Mayor Hickenlooper, who became governor of Colorado. But they all had the same goal, and that focus never changed. And that is what I think occurred when we talked about the downtown link in Miami. As Jack mentioned, there were many leaders. This issue was never an orphan. We had leaders who were impacted directly in the downtown, who took the gauntlet up, but we also had the mayor of the county, who represents the entire county, and we also had the commissioner who did not represent an area that was impacted by this downtown link come on board and say, this is important. This needs to happen. This is the first stepping stone, the attainable stepping stone to creating the other links. So.
Thank you. So I want to stay on the clearly a lot of passion around leadership and coordination. I want to kind of stay on that subject for a moment and just think a little bit about how do we carry that forward? If that's one of the next steps in Broward County is thinking about that clear vision and leadership and sort of an inclusive process for including all the partners. How do we do that, Commissioner?
Yeah, I was making some notes as the others spoke, and it seems to me that there may be more than one vision here, because everybody looks at things from their own perspective, which is to be expected. But I think that we need to sit down and say, well, this is my vision, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. What are the common elements? And I think until we do that, we are going to be at odds with each other. And if we really believe that the partnerships began to develop during the penny sales tax, and I believe that to be true, that was just like kindergarten compared to where we need to be. We need to be at postgraduate level here. And I think that's going to take people like those that are up here to sit down and take the mask off and say, these are my priorities, this is what I see, and see how it all begins to fit together. Because otherwise, we're going to go off in different directions. As some of you spoke, I had the pleasure of meeting with Eileen Bouclet several months ago, and for the first time, having an unveiling of the SMART plan, and I was really impressed, not just with the plan, but how it got developed. Because the plan would have never been developed if people hadn't gotten together and shared a vision. So I think that's what we need to do here.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
Going back to Commissioner Blattner's point, and by the way, thanks for your comments, but I wasn't lacking respect. I was just pointing out some obvious. But when we look at where we were with the I think it was a timing issue. I'm not going to be critical of the half penny here, half penny there. Number one, it should have been one issue. Number two, it was a timing issue. It wasn't enough time to get past the idea that maybe somebody said, all right, well, here is an amount of money that's going to be collected over 30 years. The perception out there, and I hate to, as a resident, I will tell you, other people said this to me, not just in my district, but all around Broward County. It looks like they just said, here's the amount of money over 30 years you're gonna raise. Go figure out a way that you're gonna spend it over 30 years. I know that that's not necessarily the case. Cities had 5, 10-year plans for infrastructure and for other projects that they put into the referendum. But the reality is there wasn't enough time to say, well, this is our long-term transportation plan or our long-term infrastructure plan. It's clear. If you live in Fort Lauderdale, the pipes are exploding and drainage piping and whatnot is collapsing because it's 100 years old. If you live in Pompano Beach, also 100 years, there are some things that are going on there. So those issues were out there, but there wasn't enough time to direct, here is our transportation plan. I think the plan needs to come before we ask for the money. And the plan, just because it was on someone's website from a city level or even the county level, the same thing with our transit plan, doesn't mean everybody understood what it was. Now, if everybody, like in Denver or like it recently in Miami, understood what the plan was, then the second piece is, all right, here's my strategy, here's my plan. We need X number of dollars over a period of time. And then we need to figure out how to make sure that everyone is comfortable with the ask.
Commissioner, thank you.
You know, there's an old adage in public service, those who speak less sometimes say more. What I took away from the comments of this panel in particular, our essential partner, the Florida Department of Transportation, is not going to go forward with a study, which is obviously essential to have the federal government come on board on capital, until we have certain things in place. And we're not going to get beyond the financing component. So we in Broward County are behind the curve, and Palm Beach County also with regard to the financing component. Miami-Dade County has shown a great deal of courage in putting forth a proposal that's not necessarily the proposal that they're going to approve, but they are beginning the discussion on TIF. And of course, you can look at a rent-a-car surcharge, you can look at gas tax, you can look at sales tax. There's a lot of items that you can propose, but we have to have a plan in place, and then we will be able to move forward with the study. So, you know, it's like you're putting the puzzle together, and certain pieces of the puzzle you can't put in until you build that perimeter around the whole picture. So hopefully we will move forward. To me, the takeaway is that financing is essential. Once we're there, all of the rest of the difficult issues, and of course it's access fees and it's the bridge, and there's other issues out there, but we've got to get financing together. That will be hopefully the focus that we will have in the coming months.
Thank you. And Berth, I think you made an excellent point about thinking about the entire county and even those who aren't indirectly in this corridor. Any thoughts on how that vision comes together?
Again, when you look at where, if you go back and you look at the sales tax initiative and you look at where it was successful, I'm going to just speak to transportation at the moment, and you look at where it wasn't. Again, it's important that the entire county understand the importance of an initiative like that. How, even though there is a focus on the coastal link, it is one element of a larger plan, and they have to see elements of that plan that will resonate with them. I had a number of people say to me, oh, you know, people will never pass this because of buses. People don't ride the bus. And nothing could be further from the truth. People ride the bus. Bus riders supported this transportation tax. It passed by a small margin, but it passed. Just think if we had the weight of the county behind it, where people really could see how they were going to benefit from it. The plan that we put forth, George, I would disagree that we didn't have one. I would agree that it wasn't widely communicated. We had a plan, and was it as robust as it could be? Not when 50% you put a plan together within the resources that you were going to have. And the one thing that I would never be comfortable doing is going out to the public and making a commitment for something that in the end we don't deliver. So it's real important that that this conversation involve the entire community. And by that, I mean electeds. I also mean the business community, whomever, people that can bridge the dialogue. The other element of that for me is when we start talking to the county commission about the way that the statutes are currently devised with respect to certain funding sources. I mean, could the county take on a greater leadership role when it comes to providing funding support for operations and maintenance? Yes. Does the statutes give us a resource to do that? Yes. Are we in a position to go to the federal government today, and say that we have that plan, that financing plan? The answer is no. Why don't we have it? Because there are gaps. We need to understand what is it that we're at, what is it? What are all of the costs? I can't tell you today that I know what they are. As Secretary O'Reilly has indicated, that we may need to start this discussion, and we may need to have some broad parameters in terms of how it could be, and that it could have multiple sources, so that as these projects tend to grow, whatever number you start out with at the beginning, it will not end with that number. I promise you, none ever have. So as long as we have a range of options, you can start a dialogue with, and I can certainly start a dialogue with my board. You know, we should be in this range, and then other opportunities and other ranges, and to the point that at some point you really could come up with an overall plan. But I do think that it requires a dialogue. It requires a discussion. It requires everybody in the county to be, or an opportunity to be at the table, and they need to see how they benefit from it. And the Coastal Link is one of those projects that the federal government would just absolutely love to put their little signature on it, and we can do that. But we do need the rest of the community to weigh in on that. And I think it makes it much easier for them to be supportive of a coastal link, as long as they know that they can get from the western part of this county to the eastern part of this county, or the central part of this county. My comment.
Okay. George, what role do you see the business community playing?
Yeah, by the way, my reference to the plan, I know there were plans, there were lots of plans, but there was no rail plan. And that was one of our concerns, is that we felt like it needed to be an important component of what was being put in front of the voters. You know, there are climate change deniers, but there are also a group called mass transit deniers, okay? And I have a few of them in the Broward workshop. They're some of the old timers, but they are, you know, they've got their opinions, and they say, well, you know, you're never gonna get people out of their cars. Well, obviously, you know, until we come together, as everybody here, pretty much everybody's saying, you have to come together, and you have to have a plan. You know, you have to do a lot of things before you get people out of their cars. And I am convinced, and I think everybody who's in this room wouldn't be wasting your time if you weren't convinced that these deniers are wrong, and that there is an opportunity to get people out of their cars. And if you don't believe it, you know, just go out there and look at the traffic at 8 or 8:30 in the morning, coming east, going west, going south, going north, and forget about it. As I see Beam Fur has joined us, and
Yes.
we thank you. 4 hours later, yes, a new record. One of the things I might suggest, in terms of trying to get to the laser focus, I saw it work pretty well with the WAVE, and that is they set up a working group that had representatives of, in that case, the city, the county, DOT, the DDA, and perhaps one or two others that were on that working group, and they just kind of met on a regular basis. Now, if I asked Francois, you guys have done a great job. You moved this faster than anybody ever thought you would move it. You didn't get there by meeting, you know, every 2 months and saying what's happening. You probably had a cadre of people who were living and breathing this 24 hours a day with a laser focus to get it done. And the same way we heard about Miami-Dade County. So I might suggest that while we don't know who the leader is who's going to actually emerge, maybe the idea of setting up a working group that works on an ongoing basis with representatives from DOT, the County Commission, the Regional Planning Council, the FEC, the MPO, maybe the private sector, maybe representatives from Palm Beach, you know, from Palm Beach County, Miami-Dade County to work with us in that as well. Maybe the idea of a working group, because really we need to focus on getting our stuff together here, and maybe the idea of a working group that can be just focused on this project is something that would be a good idea, as opposed to 2 years from now having another conference like this and trying to see where we are.
All right, and I would add there is a committee structure that was set up for the entire coastal link for the 3 counties, but perhaps a suggestion for a Broward focus group on the sort of issues we've been talking to today. Is there kind of a quick, I'm curious from the rest of the panel, would that be helpful to approach it in that manner? And perhaps something to explore as a takeaway from this discussion. Jerry,
Obviously, the department would be happy to be part of any group like that, but I do think, as Bertha said, Broward County needs to know what their priorities are for transit. Is it east-west? Is it north-south? Is it both? Clearly, this solves one particular problem, but there are lots of other problems in the county. You need to know which one you're going to focus on because there's limited pots of money. This north-south one, I spoke to US1, I spoke to the costs there, and I spoke to the costs on 95. There aren't a lot of other north-south solutions, and you got a 100-foot wide strip of underutilized property, which is kind of hard to come by. So that's just a north-south solution. But if there are east-west things that are more important first, then I think that's what needs to be figured out quickly, because otherwise this group could meet a lot like we have for 10 years.
I don't know that I would characterize that one has a priority over the other. I think that there were a number of initiatives on our end that start that conversation that would be difficult to put in place under the current financial structure. So I read a headline that says Broward County is going to make everybody suffer because the tax didn't pass, and I don't know where that came from because we certainly didn't cut our budget. The commission funded the transportation budget at the same level it had been funding the program in the past. So I think that having a working group, we can participate as long as that working group has that connectivity from the west to the east so that they can see what we're trying to accomplish and that vision for what other opportunities to create that connectivity along the coastal link corridor and how that helps it in total, I think could happen.
Commissioner, yes.
Yeah, my final thought. Government doesn't move very fast, but technology does. And plans moving forward for 10, 15, 20 years, if they're all based on what we've done in the past and how to make it work better, are not going to work. In 10 years or less, there's going to be 5 years, there are going to be autonomous buses. Are we planning for that? Do we know how that would work, where it would work? Do we have an infrastructure that's capable of handling that? What is the impact of ride sharing on Uber-type vehicles? What effect does that have on public transportation as we have traditionally seen it? Signalization. I was on the MPO in the 90s when we talked about replacing copper wire with fiber optics, but is that the end result of technology today? So what we have in front here at the table today are a lot of people who, sorry folks, we're all old enough to say this, we're old timers here. And what we need to do, now we can all regenerate our thinking and get younger, but we need to realize that the world's changing faster than government can keep up. I think that is one of the real challenges we have, is to think in terms of whether it's the Broward Workshop, Broward County, the MPO, or what have you, is stop thinking about just adding more to what we've done before and think about what technology is doing that enable us. And I'll tell you what, we need, and if we're going to have a working group, bring the private sector in, bring the technology people in. Let them tell us what they see happening in the next 5 or 10 years that we need to overlay in any plans that we have.
Commissioner LaMarca.
Well, not to debate Commissioner Blattner's use of the word old timer, but everything he said after that, I agree. I was just in San Francisco and we saw I don't know if there was a Ford Fusion and it had all this stuff on it, spinning things on top. And it didn't say Google on the side, so I know it wasn't a Google car taking Google Map pictures. It was an unstaffed, it was an autonomous Uber vehicle. Now, understand that right now they actually have a driver in the car just sitting there to make sure that nothing happens in case they have to take the wheel. But that's already going on. That's the speed to which with business moves. The Broward Workshop being on board with this. Look, my perspective is every time they get on board with an issue, it's to help, and traditionally they succeed, whether it's the school board bond, again, short period of time with the referendum, but why wouldn't we look towards, look at what FEC, FECI, or the companies did with All Aboard, now Brightline, how quick that moved. We're topped off at Fort Lauderdale. They're under construction in Miami. They're probably getting close to topped off at West Palm Beach. That's the way with which business moves forward. So government needs to be part of that, or sit here and continue to think about what we're going to do someday in the future. We're sitting in a building that, God willing, will be pushed over to the water within the next couple of years, and that only took 4 tries. 4 tries with us losing 60, 70, 80, it'll be $100 million a year in lost business by the time we build the convention center hotel, expand the rest of this, and our piece of that might be $100 million. So we'll have lost that every year, and now we're going to do it. So we need to embrace the workshop, the alliance, the companies that are here. Magic Leap's not here because the weather's nice. Magic Leap's here because we do have a fair amount of the talent supply and education, the folks that they need here, as well as the weather. But we need to embrace those issues, as well as the marine industry and the folks that make this happen. And we can move forward a lot quicker if we're doing this together. And oh, by the way, somewhere in there is the word public-private partnerships, which means if it's a good deal for the business community, they're going to invest in it. So we don't have to come up with all the money, but we do have to have a plan to move it forward.
I know we are running tight on time. Any quick final thoughts before we wrap up? Anybody?
I just want to mention that, I agree with Bertha. I don't think it's an either or, so I disagree with Jerry a little bit here. If you really want to see it, just go out and take a look at it. And any given morning, whether you're talking about Cypress Creek Road, 10th Street connection up in Deerfield Beach, 595, the east-west connectivity is an essential component of our overall transportation plan for the county, the MPO, the cities, and mostly the people that are out there in their cars. So I think there's a way to build on the wave, to work with and the FEC and the Coastal Link in order to build, could be light rail, not a wave continuation, but in order to bring people into some of those corridors. And obviously our bus system is out there as well, and we continue to improve that every year as well. So it's an overall transportation system, not just the Coastal Link. But the Coastal Link does require, again, the laser focus, and that's why I suggested that we create a working group to focus on that project in and of itself, since it's happening.
All right.
I think we would be remiss if Vice Mayor Furr did not come up and have a few words with us, because ultimately we've been having, he and I have had really spirited conversations about the Tri-Road Coastal Link. He is very, very passionate about this issue. So the reason we're here is so that we can all hopefully get on the same page. And it is so ironic that you would find yourself stuck in traffic on the very day.
It wasn't lost on me. The irony was not lost on me.
I wanted to ask him how many birdies he got this morning.
Oh, I know. I could have played a whole round of golf in this.
Quite ironic.
Well, at first I want to thank your staff for helping put all this together, and the South Florida Regional Planning Council, your staff, for putting all this together as well. I think what we really wanted to do is have everybody in the same room. It was amazing traffic today. It really did. The only saving grace was I was right in front of the express bus. So I'm watching the express bus behind me, and all along the way, the amount of people waiting to catch a bus was, the bus shelters were just jammed. So it was pretty amazing. But I wish I would have had a chance to hear this. Luckily, I've had a chance to hear many of the presentations kind of individually from everybody. And when I was hearing them, and when we went down to, when the South Florida Regional Planning Council had a chance to go down to Miami, there were some very good presentations down there. And I saw the need for us to try to, I think we all saw the need that we needed everybody in the same room. And we all needed to be talking together, and finally we had a chance to. I love the idea of having a working group. And I like the idea of the South Florida Regional Planning Council kind of being in the middle of that, because I think that's in your bailiwick. I think that's what your job is to do. I think that's what that's supposed to do. And bring as many people in and put a laser focus on it as much as we can. I know Commissioner Ryan's been in the middle of this for a long time now, and as has Commissioner Lamarca. So there's a lot, I think there's a lot of people, I think there's a lot of willingness here to make this happen. When I think of the East Coast, the Florida East Coast Railway, I look at that as the spine for the entire transportation system, up and down. And the part, and I heard, I think somebody from all aboard say it the other day, it's like starting on third base. It's already there. You don't have to start from scratch. You're not up to the plate. You're on third base. The rails are there, and let's make it move. So with those thoughts, sorry I missed everything. The tie went off after 2 hours. It was like, I'm done with this. I did get a chance to play a lot of harmonica though, so that was okay. Okay. Anyway, thank you all very much for coming. Any other last thoughts? You can.
Thank you. I know we had indicated we would have a few moments for questions. Perhaps if the panel would indulge a couple questions before we break. I know Commissioner Ryan had an appointment, but if anyone would like, we'll take a couple minutes of questions from the audience before we adjourn.
Hi, how are you? Josh Levy, Mayor of Hollywood. We're a city in the southern part of the county, and it seemed to me like a big decision that the county needs to make going forward when we talk about Tri-Rail Coastal Link. Today was my first foray into it, is a decision or an admission that this all starts in Miami-Dade County, and we're a connection from what's already in progress in Miami-Dade County, where they still need to find a way to get to Aventura and to get to our doorstep. And then, of course, a natural link for us is to start heading north. So I think the perspective, and if we're talking about laser light focus, should be to understand, where they're going to be with regards to getting to Aventura, and then quickly getting to Hollywood, Dania Beach, and of course the hub that is the airport. And so, unless I'm mistaken in my perspective that I've kind of tried to learn today, what impressions do you have? Some of you talked about, piecemeal or doing what we have first. It's my impression that the southern part of the county and heading north is clearly the first step. Unless you suggest otherwise, and
I think as the commissioner represents from the northern part of the county, Deerfield Beach down to Fort Lauderdale, and I'm not saying that geographically, other than to say that the whole thing needs to be in a plan. We heard Commissioner Abrams from Boca Raton, Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, or Palm Beach County here earlier. If this is going to work, the whole plan needs to be together, and we all have needs, but the plan needs to be first, and then we need to make the commitment to the funding. I mean, I still don't think you can move a plan forward, whether it's through referendum or federal or state or TIF, any type of funding, until you have a plan in place. And we're close. I mean, I think we have it on paper. We now need to start working out the arrangement of who's going to take the lead, and that just doesn't mean paying for it. That means everyone's going to be behind and with that person, with that agency, and move it forward. But I think you're right. That's going to be the connection. But then it continues to go up to the other two counties.
Jerry.
Just from a project perspective, looking at ridership and everything like that, probably the most logical first segment would be build the Pompano crossover and go south into Miami. And then you'd get the ridership of the whole Tri-Rail system. You'd build that linkage. Plus, it'd be a lot more ridership than the Aventura South piece. But it could be done either way.
Good afternoon. Blaniva Fulmore with the School Board of Broward County Transportation Department. I'm here on behalf of my director, Patricia Snell. I just pretty much want to give an overview of some of our numbers with the buses we do have traveling on our roadways that do impact our traffic, and that could be considered a food for thought for the project planning. We have a total of 955 routes that we dispatch daily. And these routes do travel across both the CSX and FEC roadways. So I think that's something that should be considered, as in the project planning part of it. And we also have our largest depot terminal, which would be right within a quarter of a mile of that connecting point in Pompano. That terminal dispatches 262 routes. So I think that may be, something to consider with that innovation project with that connection point in Pompano. And that was just something I just wanted to include. Okay, thank
right.
you.
Thank you. And I know some of you have filled out the index cards and so forth. We'll kind of collect all those cards and make sure they kind of feed into the process moving forward. So with that, a couple things. I did want to recognize that Senator Steve Geller, who's a member of the South Florida Regional Planning Council, and also another Broward County Commissioner who hopefully is still in the room.
He just left.
He just left. All right, thank you. And just please join me in thanking the panel for their time and expertise. And also thanking Broward County and the South Florida Regional Planning Council for hosting today's event. And we are adjourned.